The leather briefcase felt heavier than usual as Marcus Chen set it down beside his hospital bed. Inside weren't quarterly reports or merger documents, just a handwritten will and 30 days' worth of experimental medication that his doctors admitted was more hope than science. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer didn't negotiate, and Marcus had built his empire on knowing when a deal was dead. He'd spent 40 years constructing Chen Hospitality Group from a single food truck into a constellation of restaurants spanning 3 continents. Forbes called him the golden touch of fine dining. His employees called him Mr. Chen, never Marcus, always with a slight tremor of fear in their voices. His ex-wife called him a ghost who chose balance sheets over baseball games, contract signings over Christmas mornings. She wasn't wrong. Now, staring at his gaunt reflection in the hospital window, Marcus realized he'd built monuments but no memories. He'd fed millions but never truly seen the people holding the forks. The doctors gave him a month, maybe 6 weeks if the treatment worked. He had one chance to understand what his life's work actually meant, and he wouldn't find that answer in a corner office. 3 days later, a man with a weathered baseball cap and borrowed clothes pushed through the employee entrance of Harvest Moon, Chen Hospitality's flagship restaurant in downtown Chicago. Marcus had chosen this location deliberately. It was his first real restaurant, the one that launched everything. He'd applied for a dishwasher position using his mother's maiden name, and the desperate manager had hired him without a background check. The kitchen's heat hit him immediately, that familiar wall of steam and searing metal and organized chaos. But this time he wasn't striding through for a photo opportunity or an inspection that sent everyone into panic mode. This time he was invisible, just another body filling a gap in the schedule. "You must be Martin," a tired woman with a clipboard said, barely glancing up. "Put your stuff in locker 17. We're slammed tonight, so just keep the dishes moving and stay out of everyone's way." Marcus Martin nodded and tied on the industrial apron. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar deals, plunged into scalding water and worked through stacks of plates. Around him, the real machinery of his empire hummed. Line cooks shouting orders in Spanish and English, servers weaving through with practiced grace, managers barking into headsets. But it was during his break, sitting in the cramped employee area with instant coffee that tasted like battery acid, that Marcus first saw her. The young woman sat alone at a corner table, still in her server's uniform, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes rimmed red from crying. Something in Marcus stirred, maybe the experimental drugs, maybe the proximity to his own mortality, maybe just the fact that he'd forgotten how to see people as anything other than profit margins. He grabbed a napkin and approached slowly. "Hey, you okay?" She looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine. Just having a bad day." Marcus sat down anyway, his dishwasher's uniform giving him permission to exist in her world. "I'm Martin. First day. Sophie." She managed a weak smile. "Congrats on the worst timing ever. October's brutal here. Want to talk about it?" The question surprised him. The old Marcus would have walked away, would have considered emotional employees a human resources problem. Sophie hesitated, then something in her broke. Maybe it was his kind eyes. Marcus had forgotten he had those. Maybe it was just that she needed to tell someone, anyone. "My little brother, Danny, he's 8. He has leukemia." Her voice cracked on the diagnosis. "I've been working double shifts here for 6 months, and my mom works 3 jobs, but it's not enough. His treatment costs," she laughed bitterly. "Do you know what childhood cancer costs in America? Everything. More than everything. We've sold everything we can sell, borrowed from everyone we know. And today they told us if we can't make the next payment, they'll have to scale back his treatment plan." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showing Marcus a photo of a little boy with a bright smile and no hair, holding a superhero action figure. "He's the best kid. He never complains, never asks why this happened to him. He just wants to grow up and become a chef." She looked around the restaurant with raw pain in her eyes. "He says he wants to work somewhere like this someday, make people happy with food. And I can't even save him." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Not the cancer, something deeper. Something that had calcified over decades of putting profit over people. "How much do you need?" $250,000. Sophie said it like a death sentence. Might as well be $1 billion. I make $32,000 a year here before taxes. I've applied for every charity, every grant, every program. We're on waiting lists, always waiting lists. But Danny doesn't have time to wait. What about the restaurant? Marcus heard himself ask. Doesn't Chen Hospitality have any employee assistance programs? Sophie's expression hardened. You really are new. Mr. Chen doesn't even know we exist. I've been here 4 years, worked every holiday, covered every impossible shift. Last Christmas Eve, I worked a double so the manager could make her bonus. You know what our Christmas bonus was? A fruit basket for the whole, staff to share, and an email thanking us for our dedication to excellence. She stood up, composing herself. I need to get back. Tables don't wait for tears. Marcus sat alone in the break room long after Sophie left, staring at the photo she'd showed him. A little boy who wanted to be a chef. A young woman working herself to death in his restaurant. Invisible to him, drowning while his corporation posted record profits. That night, Marcus didn't go home. He worked a double shift, then asked to see the employee files. The night manager, surprised by a dishwasher's interest but too tired to care, left him in the office. What Marcus found made him physically ill. Sophie worked 60 hours a week, sometimes 70. She'd never called in sick, never complained, never asked for anything. Her employee reviews were perfect. Her wage had increased exactly 3% each year, the minimum. She had no health, insurance because the company kept her, classified as part-time despite the hours, a loophole his CFO had proudly presented as cost savings. Marcus found hundreds of Sophies in those files. Single parents working multiple jobs, college students drowning in debt, immigrants sending money home to families in crisis. And his company, his empire, paid them as little as legally possible while charging customers $300 for a tasting menu. The next morning, Marcus made 3 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer. The second was to his CFO. The third was to Danny's hospital. Then he went back to washing dishes. 2 weeks later, Sophie was called into the manager's office. She went pale, certain she was being fired for crying on the job. Instead, the manager, looking confused and slightly awed, said, I don't understand this, but apparently corporate has paid your brother's entire medical bill, not just the overdue amount, everything. All his treatment for as long as he needs it. And they've set up a trust fund for his future care. Sophie sat down hard. What? Why? That's not, corporate doesn't do things like that. There's more. You've been promoted to full-time with benefits, retroactive 6 months. And corporate is implementing a new employee hardship fund, starting with a $10 million endowment. They're calling it the Danny Foundation. Sophie couldn't breathe. This doesn't make sense. Mr. Chen doesn't. He doesn't know we exist. Apparently he does now. That evening, Marcus found Sophie in the break room again, but this time she was crying different tears. She looked up as he approached, and something in her eyes had changed. Martin, she said slowly, studying his face with new attention. That's a funny thing. I was looking up the Danny Foundation online, trying to understand what happened, and I found an old article about Chen Hospitality's founding. There was a photo of Marcus Chen with his mother. Her name was Grace Martin. Marcus said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. Sophie stood up, her voice trembling. How long do you have? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Why? She whispered. Why did you do this? Marcus thought about his empty hospital room, his forgotten daughter. His life spent building castles instead of connections, because a young woman showed me that. I'd spent 40 years being successful and 0 days being human, because your brother wants to be a chef, and that matters more than my quarterly earnings ever did. Sophie hugged him then, this dying billionaire in a dishwasher's uniform, and Marcus Chen finally understood what he'd been building all along. Not restaurants, not really. He'd been building places where life happened, where children dreamed of futures, where humanity gathered to feed not just bodies but souls. He'd just forgotten to look. Marcus Chen died 5 weeks later. Not in a hospital, but in the kitchen of Harvest Moon, teaching Danny, now in remission, how to make the perfect risotto. His will restructured Chen Hospitality entirely, creating profit sharing for all employees, full benefits, and the largest employee hardship fund in the industry. But his real legacy was simpler. He'd finally learned to see the people who'd been there all along, waiting tables and washing, dishes and building his empire with their invisible hands. And in seeing them, he'd found what 30 days to live had given. Him that 40 years of living never had a reason to have been here at all.